body sensations in partnership with your conscious mind and even your logic and your feelings all help you navigate like a compass. When people have chronic conditions, chronic pain and mental issues and PTSD, there's this misalignment between what the person really, who they really are, what they're really thinking and feeling, and what they say and do. It's amazing how this really is. The thing about truth. Hi, I'm Michael Westgate. Thank you for joining me. I've helped people with chronic pain for over 2 decades. I aim to help you say goodbye to pain and hello to a fully lived life. So the title of this practice and support session is that the truth is curative. And so I want to address what I mean by that first. And then we can go from there and look at how to use this framework to help us heal, feel better, be better inside. So let's start with this. What do I mean by truth? Since that could be interpreted in many different ways. And what I'm talking about primarily is your personal alignment with your conscience. I'm not focusing on external opinions of what you should or shouldn't do. That can come into play with this process, but the starting point is being aligned with your conscience. There's a very profound connection I have observed, and I've read about it, but I've actually, more than anything, I've observed it in myself and people I know really well, and also my clients, is that there's this misalignment. When people have chronic conditions, chronic pain and mental issues and PTSD, there's this misalignment between what the person really, who they really are, what they're really thinking and feeling, and what they say and do. And what healing requires is repairing the ability to hear or sense, and then therefore act and speak in accordance with your conscience. Now, and I wanted to touch on some interesting things that I discovered when I was researching for this, that there is a lot of philosophical and psychological foundations for what I'm going to say. There was a very famous psychologist named Carl Rogers, and he was a really big proponent of this point of view. And he says the alignment between internal experiences and outward expression is vital for psychological health. But basically what he said is you have to have a harmony between your thoughts, feelings, and body sensations in relationship to how you're showing up in the world if you're going to be okay with yourself and be stable psychologically. And he was really big on the body sensation part. He recognized that there was a wisdom that came from that you couldn't get anywhere else. So you had to be in relationship to that and look to it to help you. Another author that speaks about this quite extensively is C.S. Lewis. And of course, that's from a Christian perspective. And he basically explains in his writings that consciousness guides individuals towards what he calls the law of human nature and alerts them to their moral shortcomings. And what he means by the law of human nature is that he believed, and many do, I actually agree with this, by the way, is that the truth is embedded in reality. It's not something you make up. It's not like humans made up morality just out of thin air. It actually exists in the structure of reality, and he would say that God's laws, and that you need to discover what they are, and you need to to follow them, because if you don't, then you're going to have a lot of trouble. And C.S. Lewis also did say specifically that one of the things that can distort the voice of your conscience is negative experiences, which I could translate into, shocks and traumas. We're going to talk about that more later. I'm going to talk about more later, because I think that's a really key point for this group, because that is a big deal. What shocks and traumas can do to you be able to hear and align yourself with this part of yourself that's built in. Now, the other person that I listen to a lot about this subject is Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's a huge one on this, and especially because the way he frames it often is he talks about how your conscience is what tells you to speak up and stand up when it's necessary, and that you must obey it. And if you don't, then he has done a lot of research into tracing the abandonment of speaking the truth and acting accordingly to it, and the development of totalitarian regimes like Stalin's Russia Nazi Germany, Mao's China, which, all these are situations where millions of people were murdered. And as a result, he thinks of that lack of integrity within each individual in the society. So no one was willing to speak up when things were wrong, is basically what he's saying. And, he also says that telling truth resolves inner chaos and aligns yourself with right action. Now, the other person that really believed this was Socrates, and this is really interesting. Socrates said that from the time he was a little boy, he had what he calls a daemon. That word is what we have for demon now, but the Greeks didn't see it the same way we do. What it meant then was a spirit, and the spirit could be either negative or positive. And so Socrates said he had this inner voice that warned him against actions that were unethical, and that he had decided very early on in his life to always obey it. And that's what he says set him apart from everyone else, is that he obeyed the voice when it told him, don't do that, or, that's not going to be good, don't do that. So I thought that was very interesting, that when I came across all of these influencers on this subject. So traumatic shocks. So what traumatic shocks do is they overwhelm the nervous system, as I discussed before. What happens is that when we have an experience that is more than we can handle, and the reason it's more than we can handle is because we don't have adequate resources to process it when it comes at us. We're too young, right? Or we're just in a situation where we have no agency, or that's what we feel we don't have. And the emotions that come up from the overwhelm are generated by dropping down into, I've shown you on that chart, shutdown energy, which is what mammals do when they think they're going to be eaten or killed. And the body sensations and feelings that come from that place are really, really scary. And if you don't have adequate resources to hold space for yourself in that place, what will happen is that your conscious mind will disconnect from your body. What that does is it cuts you off from the voice that tells you when you should or shouldn't do something. So it fragments you, and then it leads to all kinds of symptoms, mental illness, depression, pain, if it is stuck like that for a long time. And I've talked before about how your body sensations in partnership with your conscious mind and even your logic, your feelings, all help you navigate like a compass. So when you're cut off from yourself, when you're fragmented from shocks, your internal sense of direction is skewed. It's scrambled, or it can be misaligned. And you lose, at least partly, if not, sometimes all the way, that tool, that incredible resource about how to know when you should go left or right, or whether you should, go closer to someone or away from them. If this lasts long enough, then what happens is you stop, looking to yourself for direction. You don't rely on yourself. What you do is you could be overly obsessed by external input about what's good or not. And this is especially true for people that have been abused as children, or gaslighted by someone, or dominated by someone that tells you that your version of what's real is wrong constantly. Yeah? And so you don't have a connection to your authentic self anymore. Often you don't even know what that is anymore. So that's a very, very common thing. And as that all kind of comes, starts to manifest, the other thing that is really amazing is that you only have survival strategies available to you. And in survival mode, you shift. What shifts is that you only care about really basic things from a very primitive nervous system space. So food, shelter, attention, certain kinds of attention. And if you want to have a kind of a metaphor or a story that will help you understand this, just imagine a dog that isn't fed properly, isn't petted, isn't walked regularly. So nothing's regular, nothing's predictable. And what happens is the dog becomes very needy or shut down, or both. It can, and sometimes very aggressive, because it can't count on anything. And so it's very dysregulating. And the survival energy overrides any ability to be authentic, to have a preference, or to say no or yes to things, or to play even, because that's not part of that place inside our nervous system. So what's needed to come out of these problems is an environment that actually supports truth. And of course, changing the change of environment would obviously be largely people. So you want to be around people that actually are the opposite of abusive. So what they want for you is what's best for you. What they want is to see you grow, and they're going to cheer. Oh, yeah, you did it. Yay. Instead of put you down or say, try to show you up when you're doing better, or when you're doing worse, maybe they add to it. So that's what we have to move away from. Now, there's other physical things that in the environment that are important too, including habits of self-care. One of the main things is to make sure that you have healthy people around you. So what truth will do, or the pursuit of truth, is it reconnects you with what is real for you. Now, I mean, that's not separate from reality 100%, but it's very important to start with, what do I really feel, think, and want? And that's a hard enough place to start for most people anyway. So, but that's what you're shooting for, is what do I really need, want, and what I want to move forward towards or away from. And as you can imagine, when you're abused or gaslighted by someone, this whole orientation about what you want or don't want is very distorted, and it makes you very unlikely to trust your own perceptions or your own sense of things. For us to change this, we need to break that pattern of survival, that constant orientation that is only survival based. And that's why I talk a lot about practices, because the practices actually aid in that ability to move out of places of survival and into places of connection that's safe. But it also aids you in this way, which I think is not very well understood. When you have a shock to your system, I'll go back to the metaphor I tend to use, which is, if you're a hero in a myth or a fairy tale, what happens is you go up against something which we'll call metaphorically a dragon, because a dragon represents unknown territory, things you don't know how to handle, things that are scary. So it's the unknown. And when you face this unknown thing, it defeats you. It crushes you in some way. And that's not how you want your fairy tale to go, or your myth, right? What you want is, I faced the dragon, I overcame it, and I brought the treasure back to share with everyone else, because I'm stronger, I'm wiser, I have more knowledge now. That's the pattern. So what we want is to strengthen you so that you can actually return to the dragons that burned you. And that would include all the things that happened to you that have misshapen your consciousness and misshapen your response to things, cause you to ignore your conscience, and do something else just for survival. And so what we want is practices strengthen you. They give you more capacity to handle when you go back into the dragon's lair. And when you're going back into the dragon's lair, you're going back down into that place of overwhelm with all those emotions that you originally felt. But to survive that and to transform it, you have to actually stick with the experience long enough for it to be reorganized. And it's one of those things where, if you think about any sort of experience where you have to stick with it even though it's hard, and it could be, if you're an athlete, it could be pushing to the very finish line. You give it your all, and then after you're done, you're like, oh, and then you recover and you feel different and you're proud of yourself. Now, if you were running for the finish line and you said, you know what, screw it, it just hurts too much, I'm going to walk instead, you don't get that same experience. And that's exactly what we tend to do with our experiences and our emotions, is that we avoid the difficult experiences that are lingering in our nervous system. And we have symptoms instead. The symptoms are a sign that we're ignoring it. the chronic pain, the migraine, the stomach ache, the trouble sleeping are at least potentially, I'm not saying this is always 100% this, but it's very likely, you not wanting to attend to a feeling that's calling out for you to attend to. And once you finally have the strength and resources to go into that place, it is going to bring you back down to hell for a while, because that's how it works. You go back down to that hellish place. But this time you're strong enough to stick with it long enough for it to shift and to kind of unstick, because now you've actually learned how to be in that place without dysregulating and running away. And then it gets shifted. And the next time you meet that dragon or someone similar, the routine. And you're like, okay, I know how to take a chunk out of you, or I know how to defeat you because I've done it before. So it gives you more strength. So therefore, revisiting painful experiences helps release trapped emotions in your body. And as Peter Levine, who I've mentioned before, he's one of these trauma experts, you need an empathetic witness to your pain for you to heal. And if you get stronger in yourself, you can actually be an empathetic witness to yourself. And then you want to find other people, too, to help you. At some point, you're going to need other people to help. There is definitely a lot of work you can do on your own, but I do think that eventually we must venture out into the wild world and try to find people to help us process our experience of being burned by dragons. Anyway, yeah, so by doing this, you're gonna bring the past experiences out of the darkness and back into your life, so they no longer hold power over you, and they no longer distort how you respond to your world, so they're more congruent. So now I want to talk about a few elements that are really critical in this process, because it's not like you're going to be able to trust it 100% at first. The first step is hearing it and acknowledging that that's what you see and feel. Doesn't mean it's right, but the first step is the honest engagement and the kind of admitting to yourself, well, I'm really angry right now. I wish I really feel like I want to punch that person out. Doesn't mean you should, right? But it's a good start, if especially you're someone that tends not to stand up for yourself. So that sort of anger that comes up could be useful once it's tamed, but the first step is knowing that you wish you could punch them out. Instead of just denying it and saying, oh, I'm fine. I don't care what they did. I'm fine. If it's not true, then that's another form of incongruence. So I want to talk just briefly about a subject that I could probably spend 5 hours talking about, which is temperament. So all of us come into the world with certain temperamental dynamics. It's a psychological theory. It's called personality theory. And I studied it about 4 years ago, and I found it to be unbelievably helpful in this process, because one of the things it points out is certain distortions that you may have, even aside from traumatic shocks, but if you have traumatic shocks, this will make this worse, in how you see yourself in the world based on your temperament. So one of the, and see, if you guys relate to any of these, please make a note, because this is really helpful to know. So if you're high in what's called conscientiousness, which is a trait where you're very hardworking and dutiful, that you're super responsible, then your tendency will be to take on more than is your share of responsibility and not delegate, right? So, you'll just take it on yourself and wear yourself out. Now, if a traumatic shock added to that, then you're probably someone that you would work yourself to death and then collapse, and that'll be kind of a lifelong pattern. That's one of mine, so I know that well. The other one is it's called volatility. So what that means is that you're more sensitive to negative messages than other people. And it's not a defect. If you're high in that, you're better at certain things than other people. Like you're a good caretaker, you're a good, mother or loving father, or you're a healthcare practitioner, because you're very, very aware of how people's feelings and thoughts are. And then part of that spectrum can also be that you're very agreeable. And what that means is that you're going to put other people's needs ahead of your own. And the thing that's very interesting is that people are high in volatility and high in agreeableness are more likely to be traumatized. because they're more sensitive than other people, and they also less likely to stand up for themselves and, kind of insist, I need this, and, I know you don't want to give it to me, or I know you're giving me pushback, but I need it, and you're going to stick to your guns. And again, if you're traumatized, that gets actually exaggerated even more. And the fourth trait is when you're high in openness, which means that you're very open to ideas. And that's a great trait in many ways. It's actually associated very highly with creativity. But the problem with it is that sometimes you're too open and you're too accepting of everything. And then that lets influences into your life that can be abusive, like people, or ideas that are really destructive, but you're so open, you're like, I'm going to give that a try. Not a great idea. And so that's something that should be worked on. Now, it's also possible for you to be all of these, what I just mentioned, or at least mostly. I am mostly all of these. So that's an interesting thing. No wonder I was traumatized as a child because, my environment was one thing, but I also had this spectrum of personality traits, temperaments, that also, I think, were part of why. So, and a few more notes about environment to create for yourself. What I've experienced is that it's really difficult to hear yourself or to feel the truth of what you want or need, unless you have a supportive environment towards that direction. Now, I'm not going to say you can't do that. You still can't access it. I think it is possible, but it's harder. So here are some of the things that I recommend is you try to make relationships with people who are supportive and loving and that want the best for you. Now, depending on your background, that might be really difficult, but it should be a goal because good people really help healing and they really draw you out because they're not repeating the problems that you have had. They're not abusing you. They're not gaslighting you and so on. So you want to have friends, family that you seek, if it's appropriate. Now, sometimes if you're from a certain family, maybe going to your family is a terrible idea. So that's something that has to be sorted out. A therapist, possibly. Clergy, if you're in the church and you trust someone. All these are potentials. And the others, different kinds of groups, support groups or even, fun groups. All those can lead to more resourcing around you that then make that connection with that your truth more accessible. Now, the other thing that I know I keep harping on, but I really think this is essential, is daily practices. And that could be spiritual. So you could be meditating or praying or reading something and contemplating. Attending to your physical health is really, really key because you can't, if you're going to go back to hell, into the dragon's lair, you got to be fit, right? And I do mean that literally. So nutrition, exercise, rest, recreation, all those things are essential to strengthen you for the journey into the darkness, to retrieve that part of yourself that was left there. That's the basic kind of framework I wanted to put forth. So exercises. So here's what I want to start with. I think what we're going to do is have a couple minutes per question. We're going to actually use some of the somatic exercise stuff too. Well, let's start by increasing our awareness of what's true for us. So the first question is, what does your inner voice continually nag you about? And I want to be clear that it's not always verbal, right? So it's like a sense, an anxiety or what. And what I want you to try to flesh out is what specifically is it bugging you about, if you can find it. So let's start with that. So 2 minutes, let's say, what does your inner voice continuously nag you about? Okay, that's 2 minutes. Right, the next thing we're going to do, and so this is kind of a visualization right now because I want you to connect with this and then I want you to write it down. Remember a time when you spoke and acted from the best part of yourself and you felt what? What did you feel when you did that? In your body, in your mind, in your kind of sense of being alive, what was going on inside you as you went to these sequence of decisions or movements towards things that were right for you. So see if you can remember how it felt, what the circumstances were, even like what was your life like at that point? And what did you feel in your body? What did you think, and how did things feel to you when you were in that place of honoring that voice that said, do this and say this, go for this thing, say no to that person, go to college this place, whatever it is. I mean, or even I really feel like eating pork chops tonight, and you do it, and then you have this sense of rightness in it, whatever it is. So let's take 2 minutes to write about something about that and see if you can connect with what your body feels like when you're doing that. That's about 2 minutes. All right. Now we want to do the kind of the polar opposite. So now I want you to think of a time when you said something that wasn't true for whatever reason, did something you didn't really want to do. I mean, really didn't want to do. I don't mean that you went along with it because you love someone. I'm talking about something that you truly did not want to do. And you did it anyway, for whatever reason. So there's no judgment here. It's not a value judgment. It's just, and what did it feel like in you when you were in that place? You could even, putting up with someone that isn't supportive or abusive or whatever it is. Let's do that for 2 minutes. Okay, that's been 2 minutes. Now, I'm going to have you do another exercise in relationship to one of those things that is nagging you. Okay? So this is something that is bugging you. It could be bugging you about your life. It's bugging you about someone else or a situation you're in or about you. So here's what I want you to ask yourself. In this specific situation, circumstance, dynamic, do I need to stand up for myself or do I need to face myself? And here's why this is what this means is that sometimes what we're not doing is actually speaking up or standing up to something that is not right. That's the stand up for yourself. Sometimes there's part of us that is undeveloped or immature, same thing, in some way. And what we really need to do is to grow up and face ourselves. In other words, we have to confront ourselves rather than someone else. And many situations are a hybrid of those two. But I want you to take something about your nagging voice that it's talking about, and I want you to ask that question. And by the way, this question is actually from Jordan Peterson. This is one of the things he says a lot. I think it's very helpful. So let's take 2 minutes to ponder a situation where you can ask yourself those 2 questions about the situation or issue. Okay, that's 2 minutes, and if you need a little more time, that is fine. It's amazing how this really is. The thing about truth is it requires a total commitment, right? And faith. So, you run into religious terms, there's a faith factor there that you need to believe that if you tell the truth as you see it and act on it 100%, it will, by definition, be the best possible thing to do, and that what will come from it is the best possible thing possible. But you have to trust it because there's all this editing we do around that. And what I'm not saying is that you should just go spouting whatever you think all the time. That's not what I mean. It's the conscious telling you, because often the conscious tells you to shut up too. Sometimes you have an urge to speak up or be combative, and your conscious says, shut up. Don't be an idiot. And if you don't listen, you regret it. Well, the same thing is that when it tells you to speak up or to stand up, that you must do it as best you can to the level that it demands. And if you do that, it's very scary, especially for people that have been punished for standing up for themselves. I mean, in the past, if you were genuine, or if you actually pushed for what you wanted, maybe there's a severe punishment. You're going to have to navigate that. But if you do the practices and you get support, you'll be able to withstand that stress. So the stress is going to be between the old pattern that doesn't want you to do it out of safety, and you honoring the voice of reason, of conscience that says you must do this. And if you get through that hard spot, and it's a hard spot, I'm not going to lie to you, it sucks because you're so afraid and so overwhelmed because you're back where you used to be, right, years ago. But when you get through it and you go, oh my God, I survived. The world didn't end. And I stood up for myself. And then you feel this solidness in your body from that. And it changes your whole personal view. And you often get a lot of energy from it too. Like there's all this energy that comes up. Oh, and you're more resourced. You're more to you now because you've strengthened yourself. That's the process. And the process is not easy. And it's very confronting. The other thing that also can happen in this process that is tricky is that if, like, you're very conscientious, you're hardworking, so am I. So here's an interesting thing. If you discover that you actually bring more to any given situation than you realized, you would think that would be very freeing. However, it means that you have to learn a new way of being that you don't know how to do. And it's easier to do the old thing. So it isn't necessarily easy, even if what you're finding out is, quote, positive, because it's still a different mode of being that you don't know, right? So, and then the other side of things, this happened to me years ago. I had to face the fact that I came from a highly dysfunctional family, and that they were really dysfunctional. I don't mean like a little. I don't mean like good enough parenting. No, this was really bad. And I had to abandon that fantasy shield I had built around me in my consciousness that my family was great. And I was like, instead I had to admit my family was not great. I'm not saying they're not great at all, but they were not very that great at all. And dumped that fantasy. That's tough. Then because you really feel like you're in the desert then, you're like, oh God, I have a shitty family. Now what? You can't replace them really. And, what are you going to do? So, but again, the truth is curative, meaning that you have to trust that recognizing that bursting that bubble is the best possible thing that can happen, because you can't move forward when you're lying to yourself, right? You can't move in accordance with what's right from the highest level when you are not admitting even what you see. And I'm not even saying what you see is right. The other thing is that if you speak your mind, you often figure out where your errors are. But if you don't speak your mind, you never see it because you're hiding it inside yourself and it's not viewed. Now, sometimes it's the response of other people that help you see that. Often it is. But you could say, wow, that's a stupid idea. I can't believe I believed that for years. Right? Or that's just a misconception I had about myself that I keep saying. I think that it's important to recognize that this is not easy, right? I don't think it's easy even for people that don't have shocks, but because, one of the things that manifests around this issue is, imagine this, you're super intelligent and you're really good at manipulating people to get what you want, and half the time they don't even know you're doing it. It'd be hard to give that up, wouldn't it? It's morally wrong, but it gives you benefit. And that's a conscious choice. And actually, I think that does carry a moral price, by the way. And what we're talking about here, it does carry a moral price, but it's not quite the same level, because when you're conscious of what you're doing that's wrong and you do it anyway, that's not good. You don't want to do that. And what we're talking about is unconscious systems that are preset from our experiences that we need to engage with in a way that kind of reorganizes how we respond. That's not quite the same thing. The other one is another subject, but that, that's that does play in with all this too, but I think that the majority of what's playing in here is for people that have traumatic past is overcoming the resistance to the behaviors that actually bring about a better life for you and everyone else, because you have undeveloped parts that need attention, and that includes like standing up when it's necessary. It reminds me of a quote I didn't put in the lecture. So Friedrich Nietzsche, who was a philosopher, he said, "A measure of a man is how much truth he can tolerate." I would say, we could put that in modern terms, person, but I think that's a profoundly deep thing to consider. Right? It's like, that is, I think, right. I think that is absolutely right. Okay, so now I want to try to tie it together what I've been showing you guys for a while into a more coherent sort of way of approaching this issue, actually. And I think that the truth thing is not separable from any sort of healing at all. So I don't think this can ever be left out of the process. It's not like certain kinds of healing don't involve connecting with the truth. I think that's fundamentally what it's about, is realigning yourself with what is right and what is true. And even, I think, eventually what is ultimately true is what you want. But in the beginning, you just have to actually just be honest about what you see, think, and feel. Anyway, so here's the real crux of this, is that if you're not in touch with your body, you can't use your compass. So all of these somatic exercises that I've been teaching you guys are about reconnecting with the body and therefore waking up the compass or turning it on. So when you find yourself lying to yourself or self-abandoning, the first thing that you want to try is to get back in your body. So let's just review really quickly these different exercises that are for that. So the first one we're going to review these fairly quickly, is that you want to get to hopefully a place where there's not a lot of distraction. Now, eventually you want to do these exercises anywhere, because that's more helpful. The first one is pendulation, so awareness of a part of your body that is not distressed. And that could be your feet. It's usually on the extremities. So it could be legs or feet are typical, but it could be anywhere. It could be hands. You aware of that place that is not distressed. So we can do this right now. All right. So find a place in your body that isn't distressed at all. It's fine. And then, kind of be with it. And it's the sort of thing where you breathe in, you're aware of it, breathe out. You just kind of diffuse, focus, let it go. And you get back to focusing on the part that feels fine, and let it out, diffuse. And now find a place in your body that feels distressed or tight or tense or painful. And you do the same thing. You're focusing on it, right? You're breathing in to focus on it. Try to be with it without running away. Remember, we're attending to that voice of the body that needs attention. So we're trying to lovingly be with that pain, and then let it go. When you breathe in and be aware of it, and then let it go. And if it's overwhelming, you go back to that place of ease. And you breathe in to be aware, breathe out to diffuse focus. And then what you want to do is to pendulate between these two awarenesses until you start feeling something shift. Doesn't have to be a specific kind of shift, just that it's changing. Then another version of this, and we actually just did an exercise that helps us have something at hand for this, is pendulating between soothing and distressing memories. So if you find yourself out of sorts, uncentered, kind of in the process of being triggered in some way or self-abandoning, you could start by thinking about one of those times when you were aligned with yourself, you were acting in a way that felt congruent and strengthening and uplifting and energizing. And so we can be with that experience as much dimension as we can muster. How did our body feel? What did it smell like? What was I doing physically? Who was around me? What did I feel emotionally? And then you can kind of shift back either to a present distress of some kind, or even a memory of when you lied and knew you shouldn't, or you self-abandoned and you felt like wretched from it. And then again, in these cases, you're going to breathe in and be with that negative experience, that distress. And then if it becomes too much, or even whatever interval you decide, you're going back to that positive memory, that supportive memory, and that time of strength and congruence, and then back again to the negative or challenging memory, or it could be a present stress too. All of these are designed to break up the rigidness of those survival strategies that we tend to be stuck in. And it brings us back to a social safety place, or at least more closer to it. And then another thing, now you don't have to do these in order. It's just good to have them at hand. And typically speaking, it's usually good to do the pendulation first. And then there's the thing where you connect with your own body by either tapping, right? Or squeezing, right? Squeezing. And each time you tap or squeeze, you're going to be aware of that place. This is my hand, and I'm here. I'm present with my hand, and then this is my body, and this is me right now. And then you can go all the way over your body. And another thing is to either caress or sort of stroke, right? So in any of these that appeal to you at the time, because I found that different ones appeal at different times, you can go all through your body, different areas of your body, and it helps you reconnect with your body and get grounded again, instead of feeling all spun out and disconnected. So then the other practice is actually grounding. So that's done standing. So we can all stand right now. So you get it's kind of the somatic part of this is we did this last time we met. So we're standing, and what we're doing is the first thing you do is you feel your feet on the ground. Like really be aware of how the foot spreads out from the weight of your body. You reconnect with how that relates to the rest of your body. And then when you're ready, you just kind of subtly shift your weight to one side, to one leg, and then kind of find a rhythm of shifting back and forth, maybe almost imperceptibly. You can just kind of go back and forth. This is the pendulation thing, and you're trying to be in your body as it goes, kind of rocks, right? Very gently, very slowly rocks. Whatever rhythm is agreeable to you. Rocks back and forth, right? That, and that's nice and settling. Okay? And then this is so these are kind of, how do you get back in your body? These are 4 exercises to do that. Now we're going to kind of go into the realm of what we explored last time, which is that if you feel yourself collapsing, you need something to do about that. So we're going to go through that right now. Now, there's also things to do if you find yourself revving up too much. We're going to do the shutdown and freeze response first. And this is not a perfect science. I'm not saying this is going to work every time, but this is a potential strategy. So let's go back to the grounding position again. Okay. So we're here. We're rocking back and forth, right? So we're in our bodies, kind of finding a flow. And then you wanted whatever thing that you're challenged by. So let's think about, maybe you're thinking, I need to have a really difficult conversation with my spouse or a family member on the holiday, or something like, or I'm going to go for a job interview and I feel like I'm going to collapse. And so, or even something that happened to you that upsets you. Every time I go, out, I never say what I mean, or, I never stand up for myself. So keeping that in mind, whatever that might be, kind of feel how that defeat makes you want to kind of collapse. So your whole body's like sagging. I'm a victim. I can't help myself. just let it, whatever those thoughts are that you tend to have when you're defeated, and let your body kind of express that through the collapse. And so then, but now that when we're coming down too deep, you need to find the strength in your legs and feel that strength when your feet up, and try to find that place in the strength of the legs that brings you back to strength again and uprightness, right? So, okay, I came out of that, I went down to hell and I came back. But now let's go back there again. Maybe with a little more courage, we're going to voluntarily go down into that deep feeling of despair or defeat and be with it, knowing that when we get overwhelmed or we've had enough, that you can find the strength in your legs, your feet, and you can bring yourself back up and to get some air, to breathe the fresh air before you go back down again into that place of collapse. Maybe this time it's less intense. Maybe this time you're not nearly as afraid because you know that when you're ready, you can find the strength in your legs and bring yourself back up again. Back all the way up to strength. You can breathe again. You're free again. Now that you've kind of navigated that place, the next thing that comes is healthy aggression. This is setting boundaries. This is exerting what saying what you mean. This is doing what's right, even if it's not comfortable. And so now what we have is that visualization of you as a predatory animal, choosing a predatory animal like a tiger or a leopard, or you could even, if you wanted to, it doesn't even have to be a predator. It could be an elephant. And elephants they are predators to some things, but they actually mostly vegetarians, I believe. Or even a giraffe, something that's powerful, an animal that's powerful. And in this meditation or visualization, what you're doing is you're trying to feel the confidence and power in your body of that animal. And you're trying to kind of, get in your body and say, I'm a badass, basically. I have strength. I have resources. So I can push against the world when I need to. And then what you have is some threat. So a dragon shows up, which means anything that you don't know how to handle or that you're not sure about. And what do? Well, you get your hands into a fist. You get yourself into a posture of readiness to do what's necessary to defend your territory and yourself, and you feel that power in in the fist. You feel that power, and you feel it in your body, and you feel that attitude that says, you don't want to come any closer because you're going to regret it. That's the attitude. You don't have to say anything. You just have that look in your eye, and your body is in that position. And then, when the predator or the threat backs down, or you defeat it, maybe it actually attacks you, but you defeat it. Then you let go of that intense energy, and you let yourself settle back into the grounding again. So you're not stuck there, right? You're back in the grounding again. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce a potential solution for when you're stuck in fight-flight, because healthy aggression can turn into chaotic action energy, and that's, some people have that as a dominant. And so to deal with that, what's often super helpful, we can sit now, is something like breath work, because breath work actually emphasizes calming states. So let's just try the box breath, which we have learned before. So it's a count of 4 in a box pattern. So deep breath for 4 count. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. Inhale for 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Okay, so this could be a solution for when you have chaotic energy in fight flight that you don't want, right? So what this all adds up to is tools to help you tolerate the anxiety or shut down or whatever response you have to you being truthful. I mean, that's what these are for. They're to strengthen you, to allow you to actually do more of what is called to do that's correct, that's right. And I mean by your own measurement, by the way, because, there is value in reflections from others. But like I talked to, what I mentioned before about the fortress and the levels of security, obviously those of us that are suffering from chronic conditions have a lot of work to do on the security system of the fortress, right? We have to reorganize and renegotiate the way in which we push against the world to create a safe garden for us to live. That it's a walled garden because it needs to keep the chaos out. And then it has to vet anything that wants to come in carefully so that we don't either introduce too much chaos or too much rigidity to that sacred space inside ourselves. That's because too much chaos is negative and too much order is negative. And what the truth is the balancing out of those forces, right? So if you're a strong person, you're able to say no when you need to say no, and you're able to be loving and kind when it's necessary, right? And be able to love someone to nurture them out of a problem, or to yell, or to hold it, maybe even yell at them if you have to say you're out of line, you're crossed the line. So and you have to do it with yourself as well as this. So I wanted to try to give you guys a more thorough context of why the practices are so important and what they're actually for. What they're for is to help you get through the barriers to the correct expression or way of being in the world that you're called to be. It's your higher self that's calling to you to be better, to do better, to go higher than you have. And that's what truth is. Truth is the calling to the higher good, right? That's what it is. And that's why our conscience bugs us. Because otherwise it wouldn't care. It'd say, just go for it, dude. Just get all the goodies you can and, screw anyone over you have to. Because, life's just about getting all the goodies, right? And that's not true. It's not how it works. It's not trivial, this stuff. That's what I'm so clear about now. This is not trivial. This is real, really important. And I think it's really interesting that I've thinking about doing this episode for quite a while, but I wasn't ready yet. And when I finally started working on it, I noticed that there was a lot of, it was very challenging to focus on it, which I thought was very interesting. And I did have some resistance to focus on it. Stephen Pressfield says the closer you get to something that will elevate you, the more resistance that you will have towards it. And I think I absolutely agree with him. And is absolutely correct. So that's one way you'll know that you're actually onto something, is that your resistance kicks up, flares up. So there's all kinds of subtleties to this. I mean, the other part that I didn't dive into at this point, I'm going to have to cover it in some other time, is in detail, is if your philosophy of life is misaligned with reality, it'll really whack you out. That also keeps you from the truth, too. If you have a philosophical orientation that is not well-oriented. And the other thing that I agree with C.S. Lewis, which is, I believe that the ultimate goal is aligning yourself with that which is true in reality. This is something that in the modern world, a lot of people have poo-pooed. They say there's no such thing as ultimate reality. I do not agree at all. I think that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's a real problem that people believe that, because that means that you don't look for the feedback from even life that tells you you're off base. You think you can just make it up and that it'll be fine if you just decide for yourself what's right. And I don't believe that's how it works. I think that you have to discover and honor that which is aligned with truth, and truth would be reality. I don't think there's any difference between the two. You have to start expressing what you see and feel as biased and as misaligned as it may be, especially with yourself. At least admit to yourself first, before you can discover your errors and correct them and move forward. So erroring is actually part of the process, and avoiding errors is actually counterproductive to growth. You have to. That's part of the vulnerability, right? And the trust is like, I trust that if I expose myself to the right situations and people, or to, if you believe in this, the divine, then I'm opening myself up for feedback that will help orient me towards what is best. And that's why the truth is so critical, because you can't do that if you're not allowing yourself to hear the feedback or to seek it out. And I do believe that that's what meditation and prayer can be. And that's what we did in the beginning of these exercises is, to some degree, is you ask yourself, but you're actually asking, what is it I'm missing about how I am in the world that is keeping me from getting better? Does that mean I have to face myself, or does it mean I have to face someone else or something else? And that's a constant question to ask. Do I need to buck up, or do I need to stand up? Buck up with myself, or do I just stand up and say no to someone, or build a fence, or something like that? So I think that's a really good model for any sort of meditation or prayer. Is, what is it that needs correction in me? Because one way or another, it's you, right? Whether you're standing up or not, or whether you're not facing yourself and growing up, it's still you. It's that's the place where it starts. So I recommend working on this as a primary goal, or lens, I should say. Because I think it is a primary lens. All right, I guess that's it for now. And thanks, everybody. If you found this content helpful, please like and subscribe. You can look forward to more videos about how to overcome chronic illness and chronic pain.